I never pictured myself surrendering like that, exposed, vulnerable with another man's hands on me, while my husband watched. But that night, blindfolded and shivering with anticipation, I felt for hands mapping my skin with reverence, not ownership. One kiss was unfamiliar, curious, the other was grounding, known. When they moved in perfect rhythm, one pressing into my back, the other guiding from the front, it wasn't chaos, it was a kind of awakening. I wasn't being shared, I was finally being witnessed in full. Romance wasn't something I expected. Not after a decade of marriage that had slowly faded from spark to routine, from candlelight and whispered touches to exchanged glances over dinner dishes. Jack and I weren't miserable, we were numb. So when he mentioned a weekend away, just the two of us, no screens, no structure, I agreed. Not out of expectation, maybe out of muscle memory, or maybe because some buried part of me still believed there was a version of us not tied to school pickups and grocery runs. We left Phoenix behind, driving into the red stone heart of Sedona, where the desert curved like a sleeping body. Jack had found a secluded cabin wedged between stone ridges and tall junipers. It wasn't luxurious, just raw wood, natural stone, and stillness. The kind of stillness that waits for you to breathe. When we arrived, he reached into the trunk and pulled out a blindfold. I laughed, really. His smirk was playful, but there was something else behind it. Not yet, he said, but maybe tonight. Later, we opened a bottle of Syrah, let the cool air move through the windows. He made dinner shirtless, something I hadn't seen since the early days of us. The fire snapped. Miles Davis hummed in the background, and I, for once, didn't reach for my phone. He came up behind me while I was rinsing glasses, arms wrapping around my waist, his mouth close to my ear. I've planned something, he whispered. It might push boundaries, but I want you to trust me. When I turned to him, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Stillness, yes, but also the edge of something daring, something alive. All right, I said. My voice barely trembled. From then on, the weekend stopped being about mending old wounds. It turned into something else, something more primal, unspoken, intentional. We didn't talk much after dinner. The silence wasn't awkward, it pulsed. Jack cleared the dishes slowly, like every movement had weight. I watched the firelight paint gold across his shoulders. He looked different, or maybe I was seeing more than I used to. At around 11, he walked to his bag and pulled out something, folded in black. He didn't hand it to me right away. He sat beside me, tucked my hair behind my ear, and said, I meant it, I want you to trust me. Tonight, I looked down at the blindfold resting on his lap. Is this some hidden kink? I asked, teasing, gently, but even my voice knew this was no joke. He didn't laugh. He kissed my forehead and said, it's not about fantasy, it's about release. I hesitated. Control was my armor. Letting go wasn't easy, but some quiet, aching part of me leaned toward him and nodded. Come with me, he said. We walked slowly through the dim hallway, past the creaky floorboards, into the bedroom where only the faint glow of a dying candle waited. He pulled back the blanket. No words, just the sound of breath and the tension of still air. He raised the blindfold. I won't restrain you, he said softly. Not unless you ask. My heart thudded in my chest. The chill in the air contrasted with the heat crawling up my skin. Okay, I whispered. He stepped behind me, tied the silk around my eyes, and the world fell away silent, clean, dark, not scary, just stripped down. Without sight, I was free to feel. His hands began to move and rushed, intentional, tracing me like a memory. Every inch of my body became new. When his lips met my shoulder, I inhaled sharply. You're trembling, he whispered. I know, good. He guided me toward the bed, fingers gentle on my lower back. I sat, then lay down, every movement magnified by the dark. My heartbeat filled my ears, alive, demanding. The mattress dipped beside me, then stillness, long, thick stillness. A kiss on my stomach, then another, just above it. He was rediscovering me, like an old map, like a place he hadn't visited in years but once knew by heart. His fingers reached the edge of my nightgown and stopped. Tell me, he said, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to. Some part of me, long buried beneath years of motherhood, calendars, compromise, refused to interrupt. I had never believed I could want something like this, truly, not with the man I'd shared 1,000 breakfasts with. But once that blindfold slipped over my eyes, Once his touch replaced language, something fundamental inside me turned over. And for the first, Jack didn't tear into me, he unveiled me, layer by layer, like a secret he'd protected for too long. His touch was slow, reverent, as if my skin might vanish if he moved too fast. And somehow, my body, tired, loyal, long forgotten, awakened, with a shuddering gratitude I didn't know still lived inside me. I arched into him, sighed from places I'd ignored, and remembered what it meant to be wanted, not out of need or habit, but simply wanted. The warmth grew gradually, not in a rush, but like a tide inching closer, curling behind every breath, pulsing in the spaces no one had touched in years. Then another presence, a second hand, not Jack's. It was gentler, testing an unfamiliar brush that hovered at the edge of consent. I stilled, breath caught in my throat only for a beat, because Jack hadn't left. His mouth was at my shoulder, his voice a low flame. "He's here," he murmured, steady and sure. "Only if you want this." The air around us thickened, pressing down like a storm. I didn't flinch, I didn't retreat. "Let him," I breathed, not to Jack, not even to the other man, to me. "Let this happen, let me happen." The stranger's hand traced the inside of my thigh, with the delicacy of someone asking a silent question, and my body, long silenced, replied, "First, GOOSEBUMPS, a shiver that whispered yes." Then his mouth, soft, deliberate, pressed kisses to my knee, my hip, the curve of my belly. He didn't demand space. He carved it gently, kiss by kiss, in the breathless pauses between my quiet surrender and his wordless understanding. Jack raised my arms above my head and laced his fingers through mine, steadying me not in dominance, but in devotion. And when the stranger's lips finally found mine, blindfold still cloaking my sight, it didn't feel invasive. It felt offered, like I'd stepped into a room inside myself that had been locked for years. A dance in the dark with someone I hadn't seen, but somehow trusted with everything. And if your heart's beating harder right now, if you recognize this ache in your chest, drop a super chat or a sticker, not for me, but for every untold story that doesn't fit the script, the messy, the brave, the true, because maybe you've been waiting for something like this longer than you care to admit. The stranger moved in closer, his chest to my back, his presence calm, anchoring. Jack kissed me like he was remembering who we used to be. Not a performance, not an escape, just three bodies, shedding expectation and choosing to feel. Hands slid along my skin, my waist, my breasts, my thighs, breath tangled, tongues collided, and when the wave crested, when my cry cracked the silence, no one let go, not during, not after. I stayed between them, body undone, skin glowing with afterheat. No rush, no talk, just quiet, heavy breaths and the holy stillness of something real. Jack was on my left, fingertips sketching lazy circles against my wrist, like he was relearning me. The stranger, still unnamed, rested on my right, his breathing synced with mine, his warmth against my back. None of us spoke. No need. Words would have flattened something that needed no explanation. There was a purity in the silence, a deeper hum beneath the skin. It wasn't about thrill or rebellion. It was about being witnessed, seen, fully, without flinching. I shifted slightly, the blindfold still shielding my eyes from the world. Jack loosened it gently, peeling it back just enough for light to creep in. The room blurred around the edges. The world looked softer. I felt heavy but not tired, more like something deeply rooted after a storm. Grounded. I reached for Jack's hand. He took it instantly. No words, just fingers finding old grooves. "Are you all right?" he asked, a whisper over my cheek. I nodded, but the truth was bigger than all right. It was more, much more. The stranger pressed a kiss to my shoulder, simple, tender, final. Then he rolled onto his back, one arm tucked beneath his head, like a man listening to the ceiling breathe. I exhaled, slowly. Not just air. Relief. No guilt, no confusion. Just a low hum beneath the surface. Like every cell had tuned itself to truth. Somewhere, a forgotten jazz record crackled softly back to life. And I smiled, because the music hadn't stopped, and neither had we. I stared up at the ceiling, still, untouched, but I was changed. Not just the echo of his mouth, not just the faint marks where fingers had steadied me. It was deeper, quieter, a shift at the soul. I felt chosen, not by Jack, not by the man whose name I never asked, by me after years of fitting into frames. Good wife, good woman, good girl. I had stepped outside the border, and for the first time, I felt whole. I spent years trimming myself down to bite-sized versions of who I was, digestible, agreeable, small. But that night, blindfolded in silk, guided by trust, with a stranger's fingers brushing my hips and my husband's breath ghosting across my skin, I didn't shrink. I stepped out of the roles I'd memorized, and I didn't fall apart. I unfolded, not because it was flawless or romantic or something I'd always craved, but because it was real, because it was mine. We often confuse monogamy with meaning, but intimacy, the real kind, isn't about possession. It's about being fully seen. It's the sound you make when you stop holding back, the breath that trembles before you speak. It's being met in that raw space, not with shame, but with steady, unflinching hands. Jack didn't let me be with someone else. He gave me something deeper, the freedom to inhabit my body again, not to pose, not to perform, just exist, unapologetically. And in that moment, he showed me a part of himself I hadn't touched in years, present, rooted, loving me while another did. He didn't lose anything that night. We found something long hidden beneath the weight of routine, the dust of duty. As for the stranger, he gave me nothing but his undivided attention, and strangely, that was enough. There were no promises exchanged, no definitions carved, no plans for repetition. Some moments aren't about future, they're about truth, about showing up completely, with the armor off. People are quick to label. They want to name it, call it open, call it reckless, call it courageous, call it betrayal. Labels are tidy. Labels make it easier to cast judgment. But what if this wasn't about rebellion or rules at all? What if it was about allowing myself to want, to feel, to be held without earning it, to be touched without explaining why I needed it? Jack didn't need to say much, he never does. But later that night, when his hand moved down my back, slow, deliberate, knowing it spoke louder than language ever could, it said, "I still see all of you." It said, "You don't have to fold yourself to fit inside this marriage anymore." And I answered, not with words, but with the way I breathed easier, the way I leaned into the silence, the way I stopped resisting being seen. Maybe that's what intimacy really is, not structure, not control, not the walls we build to keep things safe, but the risk of meeting someone exactly where they are without a map. Even if it's imperfect, even if it scares you, even if no one else understands. If you've stayed with me this far, if something inside you stirred, even as you didn't expect it to, maybe you know what I mean. If you never thought a story like this would speak to you, but somehow it does, leave a super chat or sticker, not for the shock, but for the honesty, for the ache we don't always talk about. And if you could whisper one uncensored sentence to the person who holds your heart, what would you say? Write it in the comments. No filters, no masks. Just that one thing you've been holding back.